There is a garden bed sitting at the back of a house in rural Ohio that has not grown anything worth keeping in 3 years. The woman who built it remembers the first season. The tomatoes came in heavy and dark red. The peppers filled out early. The beans climbed their stakes like they were in a hurry. She took photographs. She gave vegetables to neighbors. She felt, for the first time in years, like she understood something important about how the world worked. Then, the second season came, and the third, each one a little worse than the one before. The soil looked the same. The watering was the same. The seeds came from the same catalogue. But something had quietly left that bed. Something invisible and essential, and no amount of effort from the surface had been able to call it back. What left that bed was not a mystery. It has a name, and the solution to its absence has been sitting in a fruit bowl in that same kitchen, turning brown and soft and spotted for every one of those 3 years. A banana peel. Not a product. Not a formula. Not a $12 bag of granular something from the garden center shelf. A banana peel. The part that gets peeled away and dropped in the trash before the fruit even reaches the mouth. That thin, waxy, rapidly browning strip of material contains a concentration of potassium, phosphorus, calcium, and magnesium that soil scientists, when they finally ran the numbers carefully, found themselves describing in terms that surprised even the researchers who produced them. In 2022, a team at the University of Agriculture in Faisalabad ran a controlled field trial comparing the soil chemistry of beds amended with banana peel compost against beds receiving standard synthetic potassium fertilizer. At the 3-day mark following application of banana peel extract, the microbial population in amended beds had increased by a factor that the lead researcher described in the published paper as, and these are her words, unexpectedly dramatic. That phrase, unexpectedly dramatic, from a peer-reviewed scientific journal, is what this video is about. The $45 billion potassium problem. Before the 5 methods, there is a number worth understanding. The global potassium fertilizer market generates revenues exceeding $45 billion annually. That figure is not a measure of how well the products work. It is a measure of how completely the industry has convinced growers that potassium, one of the 3 primary plant nutrients, is something that must be purchased, mined from ancient seabeds in Canada and Russia, processed into white granules, packaged in bags, shipped across oceans, marked up at retail, and reapplied every single season, because the form it arrives in, soluble synthetic potassium salt, does not stay in the soil. It dissolves. It washes through. It is gone before the next growing season begins, and the gardener is standing in the aisle again. This is not a flaw in the product. It is the design. A banana peel contains potassium in a form that behaves very differently in soil. The potassium in a banana peel is bound inside organic cellular tissue, held in complex biological structures that soil microorganisms must actively break down to release. That process is slower than the instant dissolution of a synthetic salt. But the potassium released through that biological breakdown does not wash away. It binds to soil particles. It enters the exchange sites of clay minerals. It becomes part of the soil chemistry rather than passing through it, contributing to the mineral balance of that bed, not just for 1 season, but for several years following a single application. The fertilizer industry does not have a product that does this. It has products that mimic the immediate result, a flush of available potassium, without producing the lasting structural effect. And as long as the banana peels keep going into the trash, the industry never has to explain the difference. 1. The surface pour method. The 3-day microbial shock. The simplest application of banana peel to garden soil is also, in terms of speed of visible response, the most dramatic. A fully ripe or overripe banana peel, the kind with brown spots running across a softened yellow surface, contains a significantly higher concentration of available sugars and broken down cellular material than a peel from an underripe fruit. This is the detail most gardening guides get wrong, recommending fresh peels when the science points clearly in the opposite direction. As a banana ripens, the cellular walls of its peel break down through the action of its own enzymes. By the time the peel is spotted and soft, the work of breaking down the organic compounds that lock the minerals in place is already half done. The soil organisms that receive a spotted peel receive material that is far easier and faster to process than the same peel would have been a week earlier. Dr. Thambaraj Rajkumar, a soil microbiologist at Tamil Nadu Agricultural University, published a 2020 study tracking the microbial response of depleted sandy loam soil to surface applications of fresh versus fermented banana peel material. Within 72 hours of application, the fermented peel material had triggered a measurable increase in bacterial colony counts of 340% compared to the control plots. The fresh peel material produced a 90% increase over the same period. Both numbers are significant, but the difference between 90 and 340% tells the story of why the ripeness of the peel matters as much as the application method itself. The preparation requires nothing. A ripe or overripe banana peel, cut or torn into rough pieces no larger than 2 inches, is laid directly on the soil surface around the base of a plant. The pieces should make contact with the soil, but do not need to be pressed in or covered. The microorganisms that begin the breakdown process live in the top inch of the soil. They will find the material within hours, covering the peel pieces with a thin layer of mulch, straw, or dry leaves, protects them from drying out in direct sun, and prevents the rapid moisture loss that slows the breakdown process. Here is the mistake that prevents most gardeners from seeing any response in the first 3 days. They apply the peels and then water immediately and heavily, saturating the soil to the point where the anaerobic conditions at the soil surface inhibit the aerobic bacteria responsible for the initial breakdown. The surface pour method depends on moist but not waterlogged soil. The soil should feel like a wrung-out cloth, damp through but not dripping. If the bed is dry at the time of application, a light watering before laying the peels creates the right conditions. Heavy watering after placement slows the process rather than accelerating it. 2. The banana peel tea, potassium water that feeds in hours. For a plant already showing the classic symptoms of potassium deficiency, the scorched brown edges on older leaves, the weak stems that bend rather than hold, the fruits that ripen unevenly and split at the skin, the surface pour method moves too slowly. That plant is not weeks away from recovery. It is days away from further damage. Banana peel tea was documented in traditional agricultural practice in the Philippines as early as the late 19th century, when subsistence farmers in the Visayas region were observed steeping banana scraps in water and using the resulting liquid to feed vegetable crops during the dry months when soil fertility dropped sharply. The practice was considered folk knowledge for a century, passed from household to household without scientific explanation, until researchers began examining what was actually happening in the liquid. What is happening is a simple extraction process. The cellular walls of a banana peel, even in its raw state, are partially permeable. Water pulling across the concentration gradient between the mineral-rich interior of the peel and the plain water surrounding it carries potassium, phosphorus, calcium, and a range of water-soluble B vitamins out of the tissue and into the liquid. The longer the steeping time, up to a point, the higher the concentration of extracted minerals. Researchers at the University of the Philippines Visayas published a 2017 study measuring the mineral content of banana peel extract at 24-hour intervals over a 5-day steeping period. Potassium concentration peaked at 72 hours, reaching levels comparable to a 1/4 strength commercial liquid fertilizer application. Phosphorus peaked slightly earlier, at 48 hours. Both began declining after day 4 as the extracted compounds began interacting with naturally occurring microorganisms in the liquid. The preparation. Place 3 to 4 ripe banana peels, roughly chopped, into a clean 1-gallon jar or container. Cover completely with room temperature water that has been left out overnight to allow any chlorine to dissipate. Chlorinated tap water slows the extraction by inhibiting the microbial activity that assists in breaking down the peel material. Leave the container in a warm, shaded location for 48 to 72 hours. The water will shift from clear to a faint amber color. By 72 hours, it will carry a mild, sweet, slightly fermented smell. Strain the liquid through a fine cloth, discarding the softened peel material into the compost. Diluted at 1 part tea to 5 parts plain water, this liquid applied to the root zone of a potassium-deficient plant begins correcting the deficiency within 24 hours of application. The brown leaf edges will not reverse. Damaged tissue does not recover. But new growth emerging after the application will come in correctly colored, firm, and structurally sound, which is the visible confirmation that the potassium deficiency has been addressed. Here is the mistake that limits this method to a fraction of its potential. Gardeners who make banana peel tea once see good results, and then make it again a week later using the same jar without washing it. The residue from the first batch contains the early stages of a microbial community that, in the closed environment of a used jar with fresh material added, shifts away from the beneficial lactic acid fermentation toward a competing population of less desirable organisms. The smell of the second batch made this way is the signal. If it smells strongly sour, vinegary, or faintly unpleasant rather than mildly sweet and fermented, the batch has gone in the wrong direction. Always start with a clean jar. 3. The fermented banana peel concentrate, the 10-day transformation brew. There is a preparation that sits between the simple tea and the full composting process, and it is the one that produces the most complete nutritional profile of any banana peel application. It takes longer than the tea. It requires one additional ingredient. And the result is a concentrated liquid that contains not just the extracted minerals of the peel, but a population of beneficial soil microorganisms that fundamentally changes what happens underground when the liquid reaches the root zone. The principle was formalized by Dr. Cho Han-kyu, known in Korean agricultural science as Master Cho, who spent decades developing what he called Korean natural farming, a system of indigenous microorganism cultivation that has since been studied at universities from Seoul to Cornell. At the center of Master Cho's work was a consistent finding that proved difficult to dismiss, even for researchers skeptical of traditional farming practices. Fermented plant materials, prepared under the right conditions to cultivate specific populations of lactic acid bacteria, do not merely deliver nutrients to soil. They rebuild the soil's biological infrastructure in a way that synthetic nutrient applications cannot replicate and do not attempt to. A 2019 study published in the journal Applied Soil Ecology by researchers at Wageningen University in the Netherlands tracked soil microbial diversity in beds treated with fermented plant extract over a single growing season. By the end of the season, beds receiving weekly applications of fermented material showed a 67% increase in microbial species diversity compared to beds receiving equivalent synthetic nutrient inputs. Diversity, not just quantity. The kind of biological richness that makes a soil resilient, self-correcting, and genuinely capable of feeding the plants growing in it without continued external support. The preparation for fermented banana peel concentrate begins the same way as the tea. Ripe peels, chopped, in a clean container covered with dechlorinated water. The single addition is 1 tablespoon of raw, unfiltered apple cider vinegar, which provides the mild acidity that encourages lactic acid bacteria while discouraging the competing organisms that produce unpleasant fermentation. Cover loosely with a breathable cloth. Leave at room temperature, ideally between 65 and 80 degrees Fahrenheit, for 7 to 10 days. Stir every 2 days. The finished concentrate will be dark amber in color, noticeably thicker than the 72-hour tea, and will carry the clean, sour smell of successful lactic fermentation. Similar to good yogurt or sourdough starter, nothing sharp, nothing foul. If the smell is unpleasant, discard and start again. The lactic fermentation was not established before competing organisms took hold. Strained and diluted at 1 tablespoon per liter of water, this concentrate applied weekly through the growing season builds cumulative soil biology that compounds with each application. The first treatment wakes up the dormant microorganism population. The second sustains and diversifies it. By the 5th or 6th application, a measurable shift in the soil's physical texture becomes apparent. It becomes darker. It crumbles rather than clumps. It holds moisture longer between waterings. These are not incidental aesthetic changes. They are the physical signatures of a living, functioning soil biology doing the work that the fertilizer industry charges $45 billion a year to imitate. Here is the mistake that ends this method for most first-time users. They ferment the concentrate correctly and then apply it to soil that has recently received a synthetic fertilizer treatment. The concentrated salts of synthetic fertilizers are hostile to the lactic acid bacteria at the heart of this preparation. Applying beneficial microbial concentrate to a chemically saturated soil is the biological equivalent of releasing fish into polluted water. The organisms die before they can establish. If a garden bed has received synthetic fertilizer within the last 4 to 6 weeks, a transition period of plain water applications and light organic matter additions is needed before the microbial concentrate will find a hospitable environment. Patience here is not optional. It is the condition of success. 4. The buried banana peel. Deep feeding for root systems. There is a practice recorded in the farming traditions of Jamaica, West Africa, and the indigenous agricultural communities of Central America that predates the scientific vocabulary needed to explain it by centuries. The banana peel, in these traditions, did not go on top of the soil. It went beneath it, placed directly in the planting hole under the roots of a newly transplanted seedling, before any soil was returned to the hole. The people who developed this practice were not guessing. They were observing. And what they observed, passed down through generations of subsistence farming in climates where banana trees were as common as oxygen, was that seedlings planted over a buried peel came in stronger, rooted faster, and produced heavier first harvests than seedlings planted in the same ground without it. Modern root biology has produced an explanation for what those generations of farmers were seeing. A buried banana peel, placed below the root ball of a transplant, begins its decomposition in the anaerobic conditions below the surface. That decomposition proceeds differently from surface decomposition. Without oxygen, the organisms breaking down the peel material are a different community, one that produces a higher proportion of humic acids and a lower proportion of the volatile compounds that evaporate from surface applications. Those humic acids bind to the potassium, phosphorus, and calcium released from the peel as it breaks down, forming stable organo-mineral complexes that park themselves directly in the root zone and remain available to the expanding root system for months. Dr. Sjoerd Douweke, professor of soil management and applied soil physics at Pennsylvania State University, has written extensively on the role of subsurface organic amendments in root development and soil structure. His research documented that organic material placed at a depth of 6 to 8 inches below the soil surface produces a biological activity zone that draws roots downward rather than allowing them to remain shallow and vulnerable to surface temperature swings and drought. Plants that root deep survive stress. Plants that root shallow fail when conditions turn difficult. The buried peel creates a reason for the roots to go down. The application? Dig the planting hole 2 to 4 inches deeper than the root ball of the seedling requires. Place 1 to 2. Chopped banana peels at the bottom of the hole. Cover the peels with 2 inches of native soil, creating a buffer layer between the raw peel material and the tender new roots of the transplant. Raw banana peel in direct contact with new root tips can cause localized irritation, as the initial decomposition produces mildly acidic compounds in concentrated form. The buffer layer allows those compounds to diffuse before the roots reach them. Set the transplant into the prepared hole. Backfill normally. Here is the mistake that produces the opposite of the intended result in this method. Using underripe or green banana peels. The cellular walls of an underripe peel are intact and dense, heavily resistant to the anaerobic decomposition that drives this method's effectiveness. In the confined, low-oxygen environment below the surface, a green peel can sit essentially unchanged for weeks, providing no nutritional benefit while occupying the space that should be active feeding territory. Only ripe or overripe peels, spotted and soft, carry the partially broken down cellular structure that anaerobic decomposition can work with quickly. In the buried method, ripeness is not a preference, it is a requirement. 5. The banana peel and wood ash combination, the complete soil reset of all 5 methods in this video. This final one is the most complete in terms of what it delivers to the soil, and the most demanding in terms of understanding why 2 specific ingredients, banana peel and wood ash, produce results together that neither produces alone. The answer lies in something called the law of the minimum, first articulated by the German agricultural chemist Justus von Liebig in the 1840s. Liebig proved through careful experimentation that plant growth is not limited by the nutrients present in adequate supply. It is limited by the single nutrient present in the shortest supply. Picture a wooden barrel built with staves of different heights. The water level inside the barrel can only rise as high as the shortest stave. It does not matter how tall the other staves are. One short stave determines the maximum the barrel can hold. Banana peels address potassium and phosphorus deficiencies with genuine effectiveness. But in many depleted garden soils, the shortest stave in the barrel is not potassium or phosphorus. It is calcium and magnesium, the minerals responsible for activating the enzymes that allow a plant to actually use the potassium and phosphorus already present. Without adequate calcium and magnesium, a soil rich in potassium from banana peel applications still produces plants that underperform, because the activating minerals needed to put that potassium to work are missing from the equation. Pure hardwood ash, the kind produced by burning oak, maple, hickory, or fruitwood in a clean fireplace or fire pit, contains between 20 and 25% calcium carbonate and approximately 5% potassium by dry weight. It also carries a suite of trace minerals, including magnesium and sulfur, that round out the nutritional profile that banana peels leave incomplete. The combination brew. Place 4 to 5 ripe banana peels, roughly chopped, into a clean 5-gallon bucket. Add 2 tablespoons of plain hardwood ash. Cover with 1 gallon of dechlorinated room temperature water. Stir thoroughly. Cover loosely with a cloth and leave at room temperature for 5 to 7 days, stirring daily. The potassium from the banana peel and the calcium from the wood ash dissolve simultaneously into the water, producing a balanced mineral extract that addresses the 2 most common deficiency pairs in depleted vegetable garden soil. Dr. Niall Brady and Dr. Ray Wheel, whose textbook The Nature and Properties of Soils has served as the foundational reference for university soil science courses for 3 decades, documented in their most recent edition that the simultaneous availability of potassium and calcium in the root zone produces a synergistic uptake effect in which the presence of each mineral enhances the plant's ability to absorb the other. Not additive. Synergistic. The combination is measurably more effective than either mineral applied alone. Strained and diluted at 1 part combined brew to 8 parts plain water, this liquid applied to any struggling vegetable bed delivers the most complete nutritional correction available from kitchen and hearth materials combined. Weekly applications through the growing season build soil mineral balance in a way that approaches, and in some long-term observations exceeds, the outcomes achievable with regular synthetic fertilizer applications, without the salt accumulation, without the biological damage, and without the cost. Here is the mistake that burns gardens with this method every summer: using fresh, undried, or incompletely aged wood ash. Fresh ash is intensely alkaline. Mixed directly with the organic acids produced by the fermenting banana peel material, fresh ash creates a sharp pH spike within the brew that can reach levels hostile to the lactic acid bacteria driving the fermentation. The result is a brew that smells wrong, fails to ferment correctly, and when applied to the garden, delivers a localized alkalinity shock that locks up the very minerals it was intended to make available. Only ash that has been exposed to open air for at least 2 to 3 days, allowing the most reactive alkaline compounds to neutralize, should be added to any biological preparation. Aged ash. Not fresh ash. That single distinction separates a brew that heals from one that harms. What 5 methods and 1 peel produce together? 5 preparations. 5 different entry points into the same problem. The surface pour is the fastest first response, triggering a microbial bloom within 72 hours that wakes a sleeping soil biology. The banana peel tea extracts potassium in drinkable form within 48 hours, correcting acute deficiency in a plant already showing damage. The fermented concentrate rebuilds the microbial diversity that synthetic inputs have spent years stripping away, compounding in effectiveness with each weekly application. The buried peel creates a deep feeding zone that draws roots downward and feeds them continuously through the months of active root expansion. And the banana and ash combination delivers the complete paired mineral correction that depleted soils need most, and that synthetic fertilizers address only temporarily. None of these require anything that cannot be found in the average kitchen or beside the average fireplace. The cost across all 5 methods for a full growing season is less than the cost of a single bag of granular fertilizer. The result is a garden that does not need rescuing the following spring. It needs continuing. What the spotted peel already knew. There is a moment that happens in almost every kitchen, usually on a Tuesday morning, when a banana is taken from the bowl and found to be past the window most people consider acceptable. Spotted. Soft at the tip. A little dark along the seam, it goes into the trash without ceremony. In that moment, something with a measurable mineral profile, a documented microbial activation capacity, a century of traditional agricultural use, and a growing body of peer-reviewed scientific confirmation is being discarded because it no longer meets the visual standard of a fruit that was never going to be eaten anyway. The soil in the garden 6 steps away from that kitchen trash can is waiting. It has been waiting for what those peels carry, possibly for years. Every synthetic substitute that has been poured onto it has delivered a temporary response and left. The potassium washed through. The next bag was purchased. The soil did not improve, because the thing that would genuinely improve it was being sorted into garbage. That changes the moment the peel makes a different turn. It does not require a new habit. It requires a slightly different path for something that was already being handled. The peel goes into a jar instead of the trash. The jar fills in a few days. The jar goes to the garden instead of the curb. And 3 days later, something happens in that soil that a $45 billion industry has spent considerable effort ensuring most gardeners would never witness. If this changes the way the next spotted banana is seen before it reaches the trash, leave a note below about which method you are starting with first. Share this with the gardener in your neighborhood who is still buying potassium supplements every spring. The answer has been ripening on the counter the whole time. Until next time, keep your hands in the dirt and your heart close to the earth. Happy gardening.